Hello, Algebra 1 students. Today we're going to be going over the Unit 4 review. So if you can, go ahead and go through the review first and see if you can answer some of the questions on your own. And then just watch the rest of this video and I'll go over all of them. Okay, but if you could do some of them on your own, I suggest that you do that first. Now, as you're following along with me, try to write down everything I write, and then you'll get a good sense of what's happening, especially if you're listening to everything I say and you write in complete sentences and all that. You'll do very well. Okay? Now, with that, let me go ahead and share my screen, and we can go ahead and get started. So let's go ahead and start page 1 of the review. Starts on page 87, and we'll go ahead and start with number 1 here. Lydia was given an XY table like the one below. Okay, so she was given this table. She decided that the equation that matches this XY table is y equals 3x plus 4. Prove to Lydia that this equation does not work for every coordinate, and then show her the correct equation / function that matches the XY table above. Okay, so let's go ahead and check to make sure. Let's see if Lydia's equation works. We already know it does not work, right? Because they already told us. But the way we check that is by checking the points and see if these points will work in this equation. So you replace the x in the equation with the x value. So let's go ahead and try this first point. So x is 5, y is 19. We're going to replace the x in the equation with 5 and the y in the equation with 19. So let me go ahead and rewrite it. So I'm going to replace the y with 19 equals, and this is 3 times x. I'm replacing the x with 5. And then plus 4. So we want to see, does this work, right? So this would be 19 equals 15 plus 4. So this would be 19 still over here equals, and this is 19 as well, isn't it? All right, so that first point works. So this equation works for the first point. Let's see if the equation works for the second point. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to replace the x this time with 4 and the y with 15 and see if that works. So replace the y with 15, and we're going to replace the x with 4. So this will be 15 equals 12 plus 4. So that's 15 equals 16. Oh no, that's not equal. So those are not equal. So that means these are not equal, which means these are not equal, which means this is not the correct equation, because the correct equation will work for all of the points. So that's how we know this is wrong, is because it only worked for the first point, but it does not work for the others. So none of these work for this equation. So, but the correct answer, of course, will work. All of the points will work for that. Okay, so we need to find the correct equation. So the way we can do it is we want to write in the form y equals mx plus b and find the correct equation. So hopefully you remember that the m is the slope. So that's the slope. And the b is the y-intercept. Y-intercept. Okay. So first we can find our slope. Now the way we find our slope, so this proves Lydia is wrong. We'll just put this proves that Lydia is wrong. So maybe in a complete sentence you'll write here, this is proof that Lydia has the incorrect equation. So now let's try to find the correct equation. So first let's find the slope. Now the way we find the slope is you do the rise over run. The rise over run. And the way you can do that is simply by subtracting one point from the next point. Okay, so the rise, you look at the y values. So you subtract the y values on top, and then you subtract the x values on bottom. So the rise is from the y values, and the run is from the subtraction of the x values. Now you could use any 2 points on this list, any 2 points, and you should get the same slope. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to use the first 2 points here. So our slope in this case is going to be 19 minus 15. I'll put on top, subtracting the y values, over, and then you subtract the x values. So 19 minus 15, so 5 minus 4, And again, you could use any 2 points on that list. So this is 4 over 1, which gives us a slope of 4. Okay, so our correct slope should be a slope of 4. Now, how do we find the y-intercept? Well, we can go ahead and use our equation. We know it's going to be y equals mx plus b, but we know our m is 4. Right? We just found that. Now we can use any point, and we could use one of the same points we already used, or a different point, and we're going to plug it in to help us find b. I'm just going to go ahead and use the first point again. But again, you could use any point. So we're going to replace the x with 5 and the y with 19. And we're going to solve for b. Once we have m and b, then we can write our equation. So this will be 19 equals 20 plus b. Subtract 20 from both sides to get b by itself. So that gives us that -1 equals b. So our equation is y equals m. What's our m? 4. X plus b. Our b is -1, so we'll just put -1. And there's your equation. Okay. Now you could always check to make sure it's correct by plugging in points. So if you plugged in any of those points, in fact, if you plug in all of those points, all of them should work out where it'll make equal statements. Okay, let's move on to question 2. Chris was analyzing the college/salary data you were looking at earlier in the unit. Explain to Chris how much a person with 12 years of education after high school is predicted to make, based on the function you derived earlier in this unit for this data. You must show your work using the correct function that connects years of school to salary. Okay. We're going to call this will be our x, and this will be our y, essentially. Okay. Now, I want to point out the point 0, 35,000. Okay. Now, this is actually going to be our y-intercept, because our y-intercept is always 0, something. So y-intercepts are always 0, and then whatever the y-intercept is. Usually we show the y-intercept with the letter b. Okay, and as in y equals mx plus b, b is the y-intercept. So whenever you see 0, something, that tells you the value of the y-intercept, the value of b. Okay, so now when we write y equals mx plus b, we already know our b value is 35,000. So I already know that b is 35,000. So I'm going to go write that here. B equals 35,000. Okay. So whenever you see 0, something, you know that that's your y-intercept. Now, let's go ahead and find our slope. So we still need to find our slope. Now, the same as before, the slope is the rise over run. In other words, you subtract the y values on top. That gives you the rise. And then you subtract the x values on the bottom. That gives you the run. And you could use any 2 points you like. I'm going to just go ahead and use those first 2 points here and to help us find the slope. So we're going to subtract the y values. So I'll do 50,000 minus 40,000. 50,000 minus 40,000 over, and then I subtract those corresponding x values. So since I did 50,000 minus 40,000, I'll have to do 3 minus 1. Okay, make sure you go in the same order. If I did this minus that, I have to do this minus that. Oop, that should be a 1, not a 2. Okay, so 50,000 minus 40,000, that gives us 10,000. Over 3 minus 1 is 2. So that gives us a slope of 10,000 divided by 2. That's 5,000. So now we have our m and we have our b. So now we should be able to write our equation. So our y equals mx plus b, y equals m, which is 5,000. Y equals mx plus b. So this is your equation here. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. So then explain to Chris how much a person with 12 years of education after high school is predicted to make. So now what we can do is we can replace x with 12 because that would be 12 years of experience or 12 years of education, sorry. So that would be y equals 5,000 times 12 years of education, right? X is the number of years of education. X is the number of years of school, right? Plus 35,000. Okay, so that'll be y equals 5,000 times 12, that's 60,000, plus 35,000, that gives you that y equals 95,000. So now in a complete sentence, you would write that based on this model, we would expect someone with 12 years of education after high school to make a total of $95,000 each year. I'll repeat that. This value tells us that we expect someone with 12 years of education to make $95,000 per year. So go ahead and write that. Question 3. Determine the function / equation that is the perfect linear model for all the x, y coordinates in the graph below. So we want to find the equation that models this graph. It's kind of hard to see, but here's your y-axis, by the way. And then here's the x-axis. Okay, maybe I should use a different color here. We'll just darken it up with the black here. So here's the y-axis, and here's the x-axis. Okay, I know it's kind of hard to see, but hopefully that makes it a little bit clearer. Now we want to find the equation of this blue line. All right, make sure to identify the slope and the y-intercept of the graph, then use both to derive the correct equation, then write a coordinate from the graph below and show that it fits perfectly into your function / equation. Okay, so first let's find our slope and y-intercept. I always, when I have a graph, what I like to do is I like to find the y-intercept first. Okay, I'll find the y-intercept first. So the y-intercept is wherever it crosses the y-axis. So that's right here. My y-intercept in this case is -2. So my y-intercept, my y-intercept is -2. That's simple enough. Now to find the slope, again, it's the rise over run. So if I have the equation, I don't have to do that y2 minus y1. Of course I can just grab 2 points and do that. But instead, what I could just do is use any 2 points on the graph and just do the rise over run. So in our case, we rise 1 and we run 4. Okay. Now, if you instead use different points and you did, oh, I rise 2, I run 8, for example, it'll reduce down to the same slope. So that's fine. So our slope in this case, our rise over run, our rise was 1, our run was 4, rise over run, 1/4. So our slope, our m, is 1/4. Now we can write our equation. It's y equals m x plus b. Y equals mx plus b. The m is 1/4 and the b is -2. Now we're going to use a coordinate from this graph to help us as a test point. Okay, so I would suggest picking any point that is basically on the grid lines. So we could use one of the points we've already used to find the slope, or we could use a new point. I'm going to go ahead and use a new point here. Maybe I'll use, how about this point right here? So this is the point -8, -4. -8 on the x, -4 on the y. And you could use any point on the line, right? You could use this one, which is -4, -3, but whatever. Okay, any point works. So the point I'm using is -8, -4. Now we're going to plug it into this equation to make sure it works. So I'm going to replace the y with -4. And I'm going to replace the x with -8. So that'll be equals 1/4 times x, which our x is -8. And then plus -2, I'll just write -2. So that'll give us -4 equals 1/4 times -8. That's -2. So -8 times 1 divided by 4, that's -2. And then I have another -2 here at the end. So that's -4 equals -4. So yes, that's great. That's what we want to see. We want to see the same value on both sides. We want it to be actually equal. That's how we know we got the correct equation. All right. So again, we're using that point to just make sure we have the right equation. And any point on this line that you choose should correctly create a true statement with like correct equals, right? It might be like 5 equals 5 or 7 equals 7 or -20 equals -20, right? In our case, with this example, we got -4 equals -4, which is great. As long as it's equal, then you know you did it correctly. This one is more of the same. Let's go ahead and try it. So in this case, the y-intercept, again, I'm going to darken up the x and y axis here. So the y axis is right here. And the x axis is right here. Okay. And let's go ahead and take a look at the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is where our line crosses the y. So that's our b. Our b, our y-intercept in this case is 6. So that's our b. Our y-intercept is 6. Now let's find our slope. So again, I'm going to use any 2 points and find the rise over run. Maybe I'll use my y-intercept, but then I'll use this point right here. So in this case, the rise is actually downwards. So I went down 1 over 2. So I went down 1, that's -1, and then over 2. I would suggest always going left to right. And then if you have to go down, then your rise is negative. Okay, so that's going to make our slope, which is rise over run, -1 over 2. So -1/2. So our equation is y equals mx plus b. So y equals m x plus b. Now we need to pick a test point to make sure it works, and we can use any point on the line once again. Maybe I'll choose this point this time. So this point is 6, 3. 6, 3. And we just need to make sure that this point works in this equation. So I'm going to replace the x with 6 and the y with 3 in this equation to make sure it works. So this will be 3 equals -1/2. I'm going to replace the x with 6 plus 6. So this will give us 3 equals -1/2 times 6. That's -3. Then we have a plus 6 at the end. -3 plus 6 is 3. So that's great. As long as we get an equals here, that's great. Last one, question 5. I think it's the last one. Yeah, last one, question 5. Mike is working on his algebra homework and is trying to write linear functions in the slope-intercept form of y equals mx plus b. So here they're just looking for the slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. It's what we've been talking about this whole time. it's called the slope-intercept form of a line. Okay. In one of the examples he is working on, he knows that the two coordinates 0, 6 and 8, 10 are on the function that he is deriving. Use the information from these two coordinates, determine the slope and y-intercept of the function Mike is looking for, and then write out the correct function. So we need to find the slope and the y-intercept. Well, first, I always like to find the y-intercept first. And in our case, they give us it right here. Remember, the y-intercept, if it says 0, something, that tells you the y-intercept. So in this case, our y-intercept is 6. Now, in order to find our slope, we're going to do the rise over run. And again, I talked about this earlier, but in order to find the rise over run, when they're giving you just coordinate points, you subtract the y values on top, that gives you the rise. And then you subtract the x values on bottom, and that gives you the run. So subtract the y values on top. I'm going to put this one first here. So I'll do 10 minus 6. Those are the y values, 10 minus 6. Now, since I picked the 10 to go first on the top, then I'll have to pick the corresponding coordinate to go first on the y. Sorry, for the bottom, the x. So 8 minus 0. Now, if you did the other way around where you did 6 minus 10, 0 minus 8, you should get the same answer. Just know you're going to deal with more negatives that way. Okay, 10 minus 6, that's 4. 8 minus 0, that's 8. 4 over 8 reduces down to 1/2. So that's our slope. Our slope is 1/2. So I'm going to go and write that here. Our m is 1/2. Now we can write our equation. So it'll be y equals, our slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. And we're going to go ahead and replace the m with the value. So the value of our slope. Y equals the slope times x plus the y-intercept, b, which is 6 in our case. So this equation is the correct answer. And again, you could always test to make sure it works by plugging in those points to make sure this is the correct equation. Okay. And when you're taking a multiple choice test, which is what you're going to be taking, you could always check to make sure those points are correct by plugging them into the equation. That way you can make sure that you're picking the right equation or you're picking the right points by plugging in. Okay. Well, with that, that's it. I hope that was just a review, nothing crazy or new. And I hope you're able to make sense of all those linear equations and all that. Well, with that, I have a truck behind me. Hopefully you can't hear that beeping. Well, with that, good luck on the test, and I'll see you next time.